Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Mosakowska, and I am a sustainability educator. I run a lot of workshops where I teach people the old skills from cheese making to preserving, fermenting, compost making, but also about growing food. And today I'm going to talk about how to grow food when you don't really have a garden. You are just renting or you are in a small apartment and you can still grow some of your stuff. So let me tell you how. I will share my slides with you first. And I need to open it up. Sorry. It's getting a little bit tricky. Okay. Let me try again. Now, everything works fine. So it's all about urban harvest. So you can grow part of your food even if you don't have a garden. And how to do it? The first thing is you have to know what are the conditions on your balcony or windowsill or a terrace. So there are very important 4 things which you need to know to grow food successfully. And the first one is sunlight. And this is the most important thing because you cannot produce sunlight unless you spend money on expensive system. And the plants which you grow need several hours of sun daily to grow fruit or whatever you want to grow. Soil, you can buy soil or you can mix it from sand, a little bit of compost, cocoa peat, and some slow release fertilizer. So soil is not a really big concern because you are going to grow in containers anyways. And water, which is necessary for growing plants, but you need to know what your plants need. Some plants, they really prefer dry environment, like Mediterranean herbs, things like rosemary, for example, lavender, basically plants which have sort of leathery leaves or silver leaves. They are usually the ones which need a lot of sunlight and also pretty sandy and not very watery soil. And then at the other end, we've got plants which need to be watered regularly, otherwise they wilt, and they usually have very thin leaves, things like basil, for example. And then, of course, the plants, well, grow what is suitable for your microclimate, and I will talk about it. So basically the sunlight hours and how much pots and how big pots you can have. And the other important thing is grow what you like to eat. Obviously, you wouldn't grow big fruit trees, but grow herbs which you like to use, or small fruity plants like chilies or tomatoes. So that's important because it's about saving space so you don't waste it. So how much sunlight you need? If you want to grow something for fruit, for example, chili or tomato, as I mentioned, or capsicum, you need at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sun daily. And it's pretty difficult to do that unless you've got like an open balcony, not an enclosed one from the sides. So you may have a lot of time when you've got sunlight in your balcony. If you have less sunlight than that, about 3-4 hours, or you've got dappled shade because there are trees growing around and they provide some shade, then veggies with very dark green leaves would grow very well. So things like beets, so silver beet and beetroots, kale, English spinach, most Asian greens, lettuces, they would grow all well with less amount of sunlight per day. So probably you would grow things in containers, especially if you have a balcony or you only have a small apartment. And I will talk about balconies first and then about the options to use on the windowsill. Because you can see this is my strawberry tower. And you can buy pots like this, or you can find them at council cleanup, as I frequently do. And just save space because you go vertically. You grow the strawberries in an upright environment, an upright pot. So containers, you can keep them on the ground or, at the floor of your balcony. You can do it in pots. So you can see the photograph shows carrots growing in a pot. You can grow them in plastic pots as well. You can grow plants in non-woven bags. They are called grow bags. And again, you can either get them on Facebook Marketplace or for free, or you can get them cheap from supermarkets or from hardware stores, for example. Or you can use movable garden beds on the ground, but probably that would be a little bit too expensive. But you never know. You may get one for free, for example. And then you can grow things on the walls. So hanging pots and vertical gardens on walls, that's another option, especially if your walls may get more sunlight than the floor of the balcony or the terrace, because there is something more solid from the front than just, a glass or typical railing. So let's see what you could use. So grow bags, you can see it. You can see it in a photograph. It's a dark blue one. And it's just filled with soil, and they are really good for growing various plants, and they can be folded when not in use. So they don't take up much space. The soil in bags would dry faster than in pots. So that's why you have to make sure that you water often enough for the plant you are growing in this bag. Or you can set up a watering system. So you can put spikes like this one, for example, here. So it's a plastic spike in which you put a bottle, just standard drink bottle with water inside, and you put it upside down, and it slowly drips into the pot. I'm using terracotta vessels like this one, or this is a smaller one, and you can see it's buried in my bag and delivers water to the roots, because water basically goes through the terracotta. It's unglazed terracotta. And that means that the water will seep slowly into the soil and will water the plants. So that's, very good way of growing, and you don't need to water every day, because you just need to top up the bottle when it starts running out, or, you top up this bottle as well. This is probably a cheaper way of doing this. Now, self-watering large planters. And again, you might be lucky to get such planter at council cleanup. And I've got different round ones and smaller ones as well, which I picked from council cleanup. And you can grow seasonal plants, and you can grow also perennial plants, such as perennial basil, in self-watering containers. So they can be moved, they can be put on wheels. And what you do, you basically put this false bottom inside this pot, and underneath this bottom there will be water, and you put perlite in a holes in a tray, and that will wick the water up into the soil, because on top of this there will be soil. So you can see this pipe here is for adding water when the reservoir runs dry. So that's the same pipe you can see here. So definitely, basically this pot is filled with soil. So you can use absorbent materials such as perlite and vermiculite to fill the legs, and then you just put soil in it. And as I said, you can get, this is a pretty expensive one, but it gives you an idea. But there is a lot of so-called self-watering pots, and they have the false bottom. And so you keep water underneath the plant, and that also encourages the roots to go deeper, so the plant will not dry out as quickly as something planted in a normal pot. So self-watering large planters, this is or smaller ones. You can also get round self-watering pots. Raised garden beds. And again, you might be lucky to get some free one. And I know that some of my friends had. I don't use them because my garden is large enough, and I've got enough ground to plant into it. But I use such raised garden beds in a kindergarten where I run gardening classes. So it's like self-watering, big self-watering pots. So the water again sits underneath, and you've got soil here. They also have cover. They may have stand or stand with wheels. So they are really nice to grow, and especially on balconies, because they are off the ground, they are higher up, you don't have to bend to do them. So if you have a chance to get a free one, they are called veggie pods, like this example. You may try to find it, and again, Facebook Marketplace is great for that. Now, vertical garden. And that's an example of a vertical garden, which is on the wall of my house. It does not look that nice now because I'm replanting things in autumn. But I grow about 40 plants in 4 pipes, and I will show you how to do it later. But it's very good use of space because 40 plants just on the wall, just imagine if you would put all the pots on the ground, they would take a lot of space. So planting things on the wall, if you've got enough sunlight, it's really good. So the vertical gardens, as I mentioned before, they save space. So, and if you don't have soil like on a balcony or courtyard in a townhouse, then you try to go on the walls, because also you don't have much sunlight at the bottom on the ground, because you may have high fences and also buildings close enough. So, you know, growing on the wall might be better for you. So sunny walls, that's what's important. And they also cool the walls. So if you have a wall which is in the sun and it gets really hot and this heat transfers inside the rooms, if you hang vertical garden on the wall, then it cools the wall as well. It shades it, and also evaporation of the water cools it down. So it's a really good idea to cool down rooms. So plants will love it. I have my system on northeast facing wall, so it gets really hot in summer. You cannot really touch the wall, and plants are very happy because they've got access to water all the time. So vertical gardens with self-watering capability, it's a very good thing to have because the plants will survive even very hot summers. And with vertical gardens which are self-watering, like the one I have shown, the one in pipes, that will be self-watering. So you basically top it up probably like once every 2 weeks in winter, and probably even less if it rains, and probably like every couple of days, maybe once a week in summer. So this is something that's really useful if you've got your vertical garden in a hot place. So let me show you some other vertical gardens. So now the plants which are good for self-watering gardens on the wall, they are plants which don't have too much roots, because obviously if you grow something big, it would have big root system, and it will not fit into your wall garden. So you may also use vertical system for plants which like dry or slightly dry conditions, because wall gardens, especially the sort of pocket type, they dry faster. And space, you need to know how big your plants grow. So it's very good to check places like Gardening Australia website or Organic Gardener website, because they have a lot of fact sheets, a lot of information about plants. And even if you buy a plant, it will have on the label the size to which it grows when it matures. So make sure that you don't crowd your plants, because they will overshadow each other and they will fight for space and for light, and they will not produce very good food. Now, watering. Watering is very important, especially for vertical gardens, because they don't have much soil in them. They have just, pockets or small pots, and they're also exposed hanging on the wall. So in a commercial system, you get a drip irrigation installed, but if you do self-watering, like the pipe gardens in a pipe, then it's much easier, and you can also fertilize your plants by adding liquid fertilizer to the water. So the water reservoir basically feeds the plants all the time. So that's something you could do. Or there is something like hydroponics with flowing water, but you would need a pump for that. And aquaponics, which is fertilizing by water flowing from a fish tank. And again, that's probably not relevant because you need a lot of large fish and a large tank, like I'm talking 2,000 liters. I've got a friend who grows this way, and basically fish fertilizer, it's pumped into growing beds, it's filtered, the plants take the nutrients, and clean water returns to the fish. Now, water, sunlight, and what to grow your plants in, what's the growing medium. So if you grow in pots or in larger pots like this one, you know, with pockets, or in self-watering system with smaller pots like the one in a pipe, you need to have soil which will have enough nutrients. So usually you try to buy soil in bags and look at the ones which have a tick, Australian standard tick. It's either black or red. Red is better. You can also buy just a bag of sand and bag of perlite or vermiculite and slow release fertilizer or a little bit of compost and mix everything yourself. So that will be a little bit cheaper, but you would need a large container to mix everything. So, you know, like large bucket. You can buy soil, potting mix of good quality. It really depends on your budget. It's not a good idea to put normal soil, which you would dig up from somewhere, like from a garden, to put it in pots because it will collapse and it will not allow the air in. So even if you use soil from a garden, mix it with some sand or some vermiculite or perlite, so it will allow more air. Otherwise, it gets too compacted and plants will not grow well. You can even use non-soil medium like little clay balls or perlite or vermiculite to grow plants, but then you need to fertilize them with the liquid. So you could use things like charcoal, vermiculite, perlite to use instead of soil. But probably the budget version is to buy some sand, buy maybe, you know, small bag of potting mix, buy some slow release fertilizer and mix it yourself. And again, you can find a lot of recipes on Gardening Australia website, because depending on what sort of plant you grow, if you grow something that likes dry conditions, they usually like sandy soils. If you grow something like, for example, basil or tomatoes, they would need much more compost and basically more fertile potting mix than things like lavender or rosemary or thyme. So you see some examples of vertical gardens. They look like, you know, pockets, and some of you may use a similar shape to hold your shoes or for smaller items in your wardrobe. So this one is a version for plants, and it's made from material which looks like very thick felt, but it's a recycled PVC. And very often it's supplied with watering pipes, but the pockets are pretty shallow, so they are really for smaller plants. So you may grow something like lettuces, but the large spreading plants probably wouldn't fit in there. And the irrigation system, if you get it, it usually gets stuck, so you need to water by hand. You can also make a vertical garden from wooden pallets, but use the ones which are heat treated, not the ones which are infused with arsenic to stop the wood disintegrating. And usually they have symbol which is H, which is for heat treated. And that means they will not have any chemicals which can be harmful, especially if you grow food and you don't want these things to be absorbed from the treated wood. And the spacing for pallets, unless you remove like every second slab, you can see it's not a lot of space for large plants. But again, if you grow things like basil or various herbs, they would fit into it really nicely. And in a pallet, you have to line it up with fabric so it can create pockets into which you put soil and your plants. So you can make these pockets from either non-woven ag fabric, or which is called geotextile, and you can get it from hardware stores. It's a fabric which is used to line pits, drainage pits, so the sand does not go into them. So you can use something like that. Please don't use natural fibers like Hessian sacks, for example, because they will disintegrate. Being natural, they will rot, especially if you water your vertical garden. But yes, this is something you can make when you are handy. Another thing is you can also join a place like Men's Shed or one of the sort of do-it-yourself workshops at various places like hardware stores, and you can make one. Or you may have a handy friend. So very good plants for this system. You usually put the ones which like drier conditions at the top, and the ones which like wetter conditions like parsley and chives at the bottom, because the top will always dry faster. So, you know, aloe vera, Mediterranean herbs, you can put them on top. Now, this is the garden in a pipe, and I'm going to show you later how it looks like on my wall, but it looks much, much worse than in a photograph because I'm going to replant it. So you need poly pipes, and I've got recycled PVC pipes, and I painted them because I wanted the color to be a little bit lighter and also to protect the pipe, the plastic from disintegrating. So I painted them blue. And you also need to close them. So obviously, so they would hold water. So I've got this pipe from recycled items place, which is at what, I forgot the name. It's somewhere on Mona Vale Road, which obviously in Sydney, but you can get it from recycling places, and I'm sure you would have some around. And you just need a tool to cut holes, which, you know, you can borrow, because the holes have to be cut to the size of the pots you're going to put in. So each pot will have geotextile fabric wicks, but it could be any man-made fabric, like pieces of old fleece, old polyester shirt. So you can make the wicks. You put them deep into the pot, so about 10 centimeters high. And also you let them hanging. I'm sorry about the cockatoos. They are coming for dinner here. And so the pot is not standing in water. It basically hangs in a hole, but the wick reaches the water, which is in a pipe. And this way, water is wicked up into the pot. It does not drown the soil. The soil, it's not rotting. So it's a pretty good setup because the plant can use the whole volume of the pot. There is nothing rotting in it. And the water supply comes from beneath the pot. So now I was talking about things you could put outside. So, you know, balcony or terrace or a wall. But you may also grow things indoors. So you probably have heard about sprouts, and you can just buy seeds and put them in a glass container, glass jar. Just rinse them with fresh water every day and remove the water so they're all moist, and they will sprout. But you can also grow microgreens, and microgreens have much, much better value when it comes to nutrition, and they grow really fast. So you use the same seeds as for sprouts. Very much anything that's edible, any plant, you know, from beetroot to carrot can be turned into microgreens. So you let the plants grow so they are tall enough and they started growing leaves. So sprouts don't have leaves. They have just a little bit of fruit and just begin growing leaves. And you want to grow something which is several centimeters tall, and you just harvest them with scissors. So you can do this even on a sort of deeper plate or a deeper tray, about 2-3 centimeters deep. You may not even need a soil because you can put like thick layers of paper towels or shredded paper and just add some nutrients from liquid fertilizer, which you can buy from any garden store, and you use it diluted. So one bottle will last for a very long time. So microgreens, you can grow them in soil, in charcoal, or as I said, even on paper. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing so you can see me now. So I'm going to show you some examples of things which you can grow in pots. And as I said, grow something that you would eat pretty often. Herbs, for example, are very expensive. And also picking greens, things like lettuces or Asian greens, they are also very expensive. And you can, per weight. So you can grow them easily in pots. and especially the darker greens like kale or darker lettuces or Asian greens, they don't need that much sunlight. They may need just about 3 hours of sunlight, and that will be enough. But if you want to grow something bigger, for example, chili, this chili is called Blue Christmas, and you can see it's got the young fruit is purple, and then it turns orange and red. But you know, you can grow chili you like to eat. So it could be very hot or very mild. I'm not into very hot chili, so I grow the sort of variety which is on the mild side. Another things which you can grow, this is permanent basil. And this is a really good plant because it will grow, it comes from subtropics, and it will grow through winter and summer, and you will always have basil leaves to pick. So if you like Italian style cooking, get yourself perennial basil. This one is an African variety. It's got sort of dark purple stems, and it's got dark purple flowers. There is also holy basil, also called tulsi, which is more green, and it's got light pink flowers. But you can see the pot is not even large. So as long as there is enough soil and you fertilize your plants, you will have enough leaves to pick regularly, and never pick everything. Pick from the top. So when you pinch leaves like that, when you pinch them from the top, then what happens, it will prompt the plant to grow side shoots. So it will grow side branches. It will be more bushy. And obviously you eat the ones which are harvested. Oh, it smells very nice. And because it's a perennial, you don't need to grow it like every year, regrow it, because the sweet basil, which you know, is just one season plant. So when it dies in autumn, then you need to put new seeds into a container and grow it again. So, you know, perennials are a really good way to go. You can grow things like lemongrass. So again, you only harvest as much as you need. And when you buy bunches of herbs from a store, very often you don't use all of them. It's just too much. And then the rest is wasted, and you find it later in your fridge. They turned into this brown, gooey mass. And this one, you can just harvest as many bits as you want to, and leave the rest to grow. And so, you know, you will not waste anything, and you will still have a live plant growing. Another plant which is from the sort of Mediterranean and warmth-loving plants, this is thyme. And I actually grow it in a clay pot, in terracotta pot. And the reason for that is this plant does not like to be standing in wet. So make sure that your pot has got drainage holes, like this one. And it's also a good idea to raise it off the ground. So, because if you put it flat on the ground, the hole may get blocked, and the water will not go away, and the plant will have very wet roots, which may cause it to die. So all Mediterranean plants like rosemary, for example, thyme, lavender, they would grow in terracotta pots very well. And this terracotta pot was another Kanzi cleanup find. And I've got some pots, nice terracotta pots from, I think it was a deceased estate sale. And I think I've got about 20 large terracotta pots. So, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of money. The other thing you could grow is small fruiting plants. And I would recommend alpine strawberries. This is a wide variety, so the birds don't think it's ripe. It never turns red. It just, you see when the seeds turn brown, then it's ready to eat. So it's a really nice fruit. But you know, you can grow normal strawberries. Alpine strawberries are good because they flower and they fruit for most of the year. And I'm just looking, this one has got flowers. No, this one hasn't got any flowers, but I've got the others. So you get several months of usage. The typical standard strawberries, they have larger fruit, but they don't fruit for such a long time. Some varieties only fruit in springtime, and some pop fruit through spring and summer. But this one, you can see it's autumn and it's still fruiting, and it had fruit through summer and springtime. So it's a really good plant to put in pots. And now you can see this one has got the wicks inside. So that's the pieces of fabric which go through the soil about that high. And I put it in a pipe, and that's the system I've got. Let me show you. Oh, my camera decided to drop. So that's the system I've got on the wall. And you can see there are strawberries over there. So they are all potted. I'm sorry about the camera. They are all potted like this one. So pots with fabric hanging. So the pot is not standing in water. It's just the fabric reaches the water and then it goes up via capillary force. So this is a really good method of growing, and also because there is always water in a pipe and you can top it up easily. Just lift one of the pots to uncover the hole and pour water inside. There is also a little hole in the side of the pipe for an overflow. For example, if it rains or if you added too much water, so the water never reaches the soil, because if soil is submerged in water, then it starts fermenting. So it's called anaerobic fermentation, and it's not good for plants. It's basically the soil, it's rotting, and that will affect the plant and your plants may die. So always make sure that there is a good drainage in any system you use, unless you grow things like water chestnuts or water parsley, you know, something that would be sitting in water all the time. But these things don't produce a lot of volume of food. Like water chestnut from a large pot like this, you may get like probably a handful of chestnuts after you peel them. So probably not the best example. And most people don't really grow water plants on balconies because the yield is just not big enough. Now, what else you could grow? You could grow things from offcuts. So this is an offcut of parsley root. And I put it just in an old bottle, put some water in, and you can see I grow my parsley greens. So you could grow this way, for example, things like chives from onions or from shallots. You just leave the bottom part with the, the top part. When you harvest the shallot, you just leave the white part and put it either in a little bit of water, not too much because it will rot, or you can wrap it into wet paper and just put it into a smaller container like a jar, and just make sure that you keep it moist, but not wet all the time, not submerged in water, and it will sprout chives. So you could do the same with garlic. You can, especially if you've got garlic already sprouting in your fridge, which I do, but this is garlic for planting, so I will plant it in a garden. A lot of plants can be grown by using cuttings, and then they will grow roots. So this is a top of pineapple. You see, it's got a lot of roots here. And I will plant it again in a pot. And if you've seen this little video, which I made for to promote this event, then I was showing also a potted pineapple. I harvested it since because it's yellow. So, you know, it's a good thing. But pineapples take a very, very long time to grow. So let me see if you've got any questions for me. Just unmute yourself and ask. Or you can ask questions here in the chat. Hello? All right, yeah, we don't have any questions. All right. Can we mix charcoal into potting mix and will this keep it drier? Actually, the opposite. Charcoal is very porous and absorbs a lot of water. So it will not really dryer, but it will also help with drainage because it will not keep it. The water will stay with charcoal, but the soil around it might be a little bit drier. So charcoal probably not. And but you could use things like, you know, tiny pebbles or even sand. Just buy coarse sand, not the sand which is called bricky sand, which is nice and very smooth, and the grains are very small. But the sand which is really grainy, it's the best for plants, because if you want to have good drainage and a lot of aeration for the roots, it's better to use something with bigger grains. So that's a very good question. I also use, in some pots, I also use a little bit of scoria. And again, I've got things for free. So you can search Facebook Marketplace or various freebies groups, especially the ones related to gardening. There are some groups like that. So you can get a lot of useful things for free to grow. Now, another thing which you can grow, I mentioned microgreens and sprouts. You can grow them very simple. You can use a tray about three centimeters deep, or you can use a plate. And you line it with several layers of paper. So probably paper towels would be the best. And then you put the seeds in, and you can put them pretty densely if you want to have a lot of microgreens. And then you cover them with several layers of paper again and keep everything moist. So it will sprout very, very quickly. Just make sure that the water is not standing. It's just the paper needs to be moist all the time. You can also cover your sprouting bed with glasses or jars turned upside down, just to keep the moisture in so it does not evaporate that quickly. So it's basically like a mini greenhouse. And the microgreens have very high nutritional values. They have a lot of microelements, and they are really good for our health. So you can always have several plates or trays going, and just, harvest from one, replace paper, put new seeds. In the meantime, the second tray will grow some, and the third tray. So you always have fresh supplies of microgreens. So you can either get the seeds from, again, various gardening freebies groups. Just make sure that they are seeds of edible plants, not ornamentals. Although some ornamentals you can eat. But yeah, so it's not a very expensive way of growing very nutrition-dense food. And this is also when the greens from supermarkets are really expensive. So you can grow them yourself. All right, any other questions? Oh, do pests. What sort of pests? Not really, unless you've got snails. But I mostly grow microgreens on the windowsill. So I wouldn't have any snails or any insects flying which would eat them. You may get a little bit of vinegar flies. They are the tiny flies which fly around spoiling fruit. So if you leave a banana or an apple, you may get tiny vinegar flies, but they would mostly go after the moisture. So they are not going to damage the microgreens. They are not going to damage the plants. So you actually don't have a problem. Bigger problem would be fungal diseases, and this is when you overwater them. So that's what I said. You don't let them standing in water. Just make sure that the paper is always moist. You can use a spray bottle to spray them, say in the morning and evening, or if you are home in between. And if you're going away, you can cover them with upturned glass dish. So it could be like a baking dish or a glass bowl or several drinking glasses. So that would protect the plants from drying, say you are away for the weekend or something like that. Problems with parsley, brownish spots. Ah, clay pots, hot environment. Are they drying? It probably would be good to see a photograph. Parsley has got pretty deep roots. So if you would put your pot on a saucer and add a little bit of water to it, that may help because that will keep the pot watered. Or the other thing which you could do, you can find a plastic pot to fit into your nice clay pot, and you can plant your parsley into this plastic pot, put it in a clay pot, just, for nice looks, and the parsley would grow. And the other, it could be fungal disease, could be something in the soil, or it could be drying. Is it brownish spots, or is it the edges being brown or yellow? What is happening, Sebi? It's all over. Yeah, it could be fungal. I don't think that would be any pests. I think it would be fungal. And is this like brownish spot, or is it like a little holes? because there are some just spots. Yeah, it could be fungal, because usually when it starts drying, it's the edges of the leaves, which turn brownish and yellow. So what you may try to get fresh potting mix and put it, in plastic pots, put your parsleys in and try it. They would be still edible. There wouldn't be anything harmful in them. But obviously they would look much better when they are green. Yeah, the thing is in Queensland, because it's much hotter and more humid than in Sydney, there is a lot of airborne diseases and a lot of soil diseases. So it's always a good idea to change your potting mix every year. What you could do, you can spread the old potting mix in full sun. So in a thin layer, so you can spread it on newspaper or some sort of flat piece of cardboard, and let the sun to kill all bacteria and fungi, and unfortunately that will also kill the good ones. But you can reuse the soil once you sort of fried it in the sun. You can also heat it up in the oven. So again, you will sterilize your soil, you will kill fungi and bacteria. So it's always a good idea to inoculate it with some bacterial inoculant, which you can also get from gardening stores, garden centers, because some bacteria and fungi are necessary for the plants to take up nutrients. Plants do not absorb nutrients from the soil themselves. What they do nutrient exchange with bacteria and fungi. Bacteria and fungi, they digest nutrients from the soil, and then they live on roots of plants, and through the wall, through the cellular wall of the root, the plant gives them carbs, because most of plants produce carbs, and the bacteria and fungi swap them for the nutrients from the soil. So if your soil is completely sterilized, then you will not have the bacterial and fungal life supporting your plant. So you may need to inoculate it with either good quality compost, which you may get from various community gardens. You may go and ask them for a handful of compost, and that's enough to inoculate your soil. If you buy new potting mix, or if you use the old potting mix and you just fried it in the sun or in the oven. So yes, soil is important. You have to know that you may get certain diseases from the soil. And as I said, it happens in hot and humid climates. But it happens in Sydney too. Pests and snails. All right, there are treatments. There are snail pellets, which are not poisonous. They are iron-based. So iron-based snail pellets. They are reddish in color. So when you plant something new, you just put the pellets around, because very often, especially when you use soil which was used for growing before, or you bring soil from a garden and you mix it with sand to create your potting mix, you may bring snail eggs. So even if you don't see any snails, it's a good idea to put the pellets on the ground around the seedlings. And the other thing to protect them from snails climbing the pot is to buy copper tape. And again, it's in garden centers. And the snails, when they produce a mucus, which allows them to slide along surfaces. And this mucus in contact with copper tape gives them electric shock. So they cannot cross this barrier. So you can just glue it around your pots. It looks really nice, sort of like bright copper band. And so that's what I do. If I grow in pots, I put copper band around, and I always put the pellets, the iron-based pellets. They are non-poisonous. They don't poison any wildlife. So they are very safe, and they just disintegrate and add iron to the soil, which is, not a bad thing. So that's one of the things you could do. All right, anything else? Oh, the other thing which I do, but I do this mostly when I plant things in a garden. So I'm not going to put copper tape around, the whole garden bed. So what I do, I get a small pot without, I cut the bottom off. So it's like a little, oh, I've got one here. Sorry, that's going to show you. And I moved my computer now. All right. So just a pot, and you can see I cut off the bottom. And I put the copper tape around it. So when I plant in a garden, I put this like a collar with copper tape around it, and that protects the plant from snails climbing. And of course, I put iron-based snail pellets around the plant on the ground. So, and it works really well, because at this time of the year, especially when it's wet, we do get a lot of snails, and especially in springtime. And as you know, a lot of things are planted in springtime, but Queensland is slightly different. Probably the best time for planting and growing anything is in a cooler season, because summer is too hot and also too wet. So unless it's a subtropical plant like turmeric, which you can also grow in pots, then you can only grow really subtropical perennials in summer. And summer is a summer break for students anyway. So you are usually on site, sort of end of summer, beginning of autumn, and through the colder months, it's much better growing season in Queensland. Even in Sydney, I prefer growing in winter. I grow an awful lot of things like, massive amount of food, mostly root veg. And I also get citrus fruit and what else? Fruits in winter. Yeah, papayas, which fruit very much most of the time. But then it's something that's not really relevant for apartment growing. You wouldn't grow large trees. Although I do know people who are renting, but they are renting a house with a garden, and the garden is really paved. It's like really paved courtyard. So they grow everything in pots or large containers, including about 20 fruit trees. But they do need a truck with a lift to move, which they've done about 2 months ago. So yes, so just to recap. So if you want to grow something successfully on your balcony, make sure that you get enough sunlight. And you may get a corner of the balcony which get a sunlight, or you may have a sunny wall, because sun is something that we cannot produce. We can supply water, we can supply soil, but we cannot supply sunlight unless you want to spend money on a special lighting system. So, and when you want to buy some plants, look at how big they grow. It's usually on the label. So make sure that you have a pot which fits the plant size. And remember that some plants like more dry conditions, some plants like more wet. So again, that's something that you can learn from Gardening Australia website or Organic Gardener website. And there is also a good website which tells you what to plant when. And it covers, the website is called Gardenate. And basically it's like a planting calendar. So you can choose your climate zone. So I think Queensland will be hot, wet or something. I don't remember. Sydney is warm temperate, unless it's sort of Blue Mountains, then it's, cold. But you can check what you can plant and when. So my advice is know your plants, so you plant them in appropriate conditions so they grow well, and grow things you like to eat. So if you like basil, grow perennial basil. Try to get perennial varieties as well. Things like lemongrass that would grow well in Queensland. It's a subtropical thing. Thyme, you really need good drainage for that. And it may not grow well enough because it might be just too hot for it. Thyme likes hot, but it likes dry hot. So you may try. When we get really hot and wet summers, the thyme suffers, but it keeps growing and it just bounces back because it's a perennial. So the roots go pretty deep and it bounces back when the weather is much better. Okay, any other questions? We've got plenty of time, so ask away. And you can multiply your kitchen offcuts. So for example, if you eat a carrot, just leave the top of the carrot about 2 centimeters thick, and you can again put it on wettish paper or in very shallow water, and it will sprout carrot greens, which are also very good greens to eat. You can make great pesto out of them. That's parsley. So again, I've got parsley root. So basically, because I harvested all the greens, so I put the root in water and it's sprouting the greens. You could do the same with onions, with garlic. So a lot of things you eat, even with lettuce. So if you buy, sometimes you can buy a head of lettuce with the roots still attached. And what you do, you just cut off all the leaves, little bit, higher up, not the stem, but higher up. So there are like remnants of the leaves left, and you just plant this lettuce in the soil, or you just put it in water. So the roots are in water, and it will sprout new leaves. So it's a lot of things you could do for the food you eat, to produce more, even after you ate it. You just leave something that contains growing. Okay, when you transplant water-grown plants into soil, the roots need not necessarily certain length. They need to be able to feed the plant. And usually you see that when you see new leaves growing. So you look at this pineapple, and you can see it has grown nice new fresh leaves. Because when I chopped it, it was probably up to here. And then I put it in water, so it just touches the water and it grows new leaves. So when you can even see there is a baby plant here in the middle, sorry, baby leaf, like in here. So the indication that the roots are feeding your plant is when new leaves start appearing. And this is when you can transplant, because that's for sure working roots, and you can transfer it into the soil. Yeah, that very good question. All the good questions. Yes. So because when there is not enough of the root system, it may not be enough to feed the plant to survive the shock of being moved from water into the soil. And always be very careful, because if you grow plants from cuttings in water, the roots grow very delicate. And when you put them into the soil and you just, put them brutally covered with soil, just be very gentle with them, because they break easily. They are just used to this gentle, watery environment, not to the weight of the sand and soil on the roots. But they will grow. I've done it so many times. And that's what I'm going to do with my pineapples. I think I will post it on Instagram in a couple of days, probably next week, how to grow pineapples from cuttings, but it does take a very long time. So if you don't want to wait, I think Queensland, that would be about 1.5 years. In Sydney, it could be between 2 and 3 years from planting to getting a pineapple. And even if commercial pineapples are only harvested once and then the whole plant is disposed of, you can get 2 or 3 crops from the same pineapple plant. So after you picked a fruit, just leave it, keep it fertilized, keep it watered, and when it's ready, it will sprout another one. Usually the third one is much, much smaller. So it may be not worth it, but I usually grow pineapples through 2 cycles, or they've got the fruit twice. So some of my pineapples are like 5 or 6 years old. And this one, obviously, I eat my pineapple, but I always keep the top. So to replace the old pineapples, which only produce small fruit, I always grow new ones. And now I think I've got about 12 of them. So yeah, a lot of things you can grow. From food offcuts, you can get free pots. Some garden centers give away free pots, especially garden centers which have very large display. They may have display gardens. Tips for making compost. Yes, you can speed up the decomposing process. So basically, the first mistake people make with compost is they put too much wet stuff, so too much kitchen scraps, and it all collapses into this brown, slimy, and very smelly anaerobic thing. So you always, to each volume, let's say you put a handful of kitchen scraps into your composter, and then you need to put at least 2 or 3 times, 2 to 4 times of dry stuff, the same volume. So 4 handfuls of dry things, shredded paper, sawdust, shredded, oh boy, I'm losing, shredded cardboard. So basically, yeah, 2 4 times in volume. In weight, that would be much more. And a lot of sources, they say 30 times in weight, because mostly dry items like sawdust and paper, they are very lightweight. But in volume, 2 to 4 times. So that's the major mistake. Now your compost has to be aerated, which means it has to be mixed, because the bacteria which cause the decomposition, they are anaerobic bacteria. Sorry, they are aerobic bacteria. So they do need air. And your compost needs to be kept moist, not too wet, but just moist. So when you touch it, it's moist to touch, including all the papery things. You may even decide to slightly spray the paper or sawdust before you put it in. And I also run workshops on composting and on bokashi fermenting, which is fermenting kitchen waste in an airtight bucket. So you can do this in an apartment, and some people have bokashi beans in a laundry or in a kitchen. And that's a very effective way of composting. But yes, the composition process, obviously you've got warm enough weather in Queensland, so it takes a little bit longer in Sydney, especially now we are getting into winter. But compost in Queensland, I think you could make good compost in about 6 weeks, 8 weeks, but it needs to be mixed. It needs to have enough dry materials, and it needs to be aerated. So, and don't forget to check if it's not too dry. Sometimes it gets dried around the edges, especially if you use the black compost bin and it's in full sun and it gets really hot. So everything which is around the edges, it basically dries. And the heat also kills bacteria and fungi, so which are the main decomposers. So you need to mix the content of the bin, especially if it's too hot. Yeah. All right, I think we are about to end. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you learned something that's useful for you. You can always contact me if you want more answers. So my website is mosshouse.com.au. And on the contact page, you will see contact details for me. So there will be my email, and there will be also Instagram and Facebook pages. And you can see the things I post, the things I do. So hopefully the reel with how to grow pineapple will be on next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye. I think you can stop the recording.